our Board of Commissioners work study meeting. And so I'm calling us to order. We have a couple people online, so welcome to those online. First, let's take a look at the agenda. Everyone fine with the agenda? Looks good to me. All right, we'll move on to chairperson comments. So first, I think the only thing I want to mention is that I want to remind everyone that tomorrow is Transit Driver Appreciation Day. So, and we appreciate our drivers every day, but tomorrow we'll call them out specifically. So if you get an opportunity to thank your driver, please do. All right, on to our full discussion items. First off, we have the introduction of our new federal lobbyist. So John, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Madam Chair and members of the board, Jen Covino is online. She is a little busy back in DC, as we can all imagine. It's the National League of Cities conference going on. In fact, I talked to her this morning and reminded her that Mayor Stern is back there, so she's going to kind of keep an eye out for the mayor as she's running around the halls of that conference. So I wanted to just give an opportunity. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's not her responsibility. So anyway, I asked Jen if she could just pop on real quick and just do a quick introduction. We've been talking about, and we've hired Jen as our federal lobbyist back there, and she's already hit the ground running. So with that, Jen, if you want to just take a minute or two and introduce your firm and you and some of the stuff you're up to already.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. As John mentioned, I am on site at the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference, where we have a number of local government officials on site. Later on this afternoon, we'll also be joining the Association of Washington Cities for one of their receptions with the two senators here on Capitol Hill. So just to give you a brief overview of our work, my name is Jen Covino. I'm the president of Covino, Smith & Simon, formerly known as Simon & Company Incorporated. We've been in business since the late 1980s, specializing solely in federal representation for units of local government and public entities at the local level, such as housing authorities, transit agencies, local education agencies, and then most of our business are whole of city government. So we have been working on behalf of public entities in Washington state since the 1980s. I joined the firm in 2011 as an associate, and I became president of the firm in early 2019 when my predecessor, Len Simon, stepped aside. Prior to that, my background is actually in transportation planning. I started with a transportation management agency in Boston, Massachusetts, when I was 18 years old as a grant writer and administrator before I moved to Washington, D.C. to get my master's of public policy at George Washington University. And that's when I started here as an associate, and I've been working on behalf of local governments with our firm ever since. We have a few other clients here in Washington state. So we've had a remarkable, great working relationship with the Washington state delegation over the years. They're always great folks to work with. In our early days of representing Kitsap Transit, we've already had the opportunity to engage on behalf of the agency, working on the federal fiscal year 2027 appropriations process, ensuring that the agency's earmark request was submitted to various offices throughout the delegation. So Senator Murray, Senator Cantwell, and Congresswoman Randall are aware of your project request for federal fiscal year 2027. Over the weeks ahead, we'll welcome the executive director back here for the upcoming APTA conference in April. We're looking forward to focusing on advancing your policy priorities as Congress works in earnest on the next surface transportation reauthorization bill that sets forward programs and policy that are administered not only by Federal Transit Administration, but across the whole of the U.S. Department of Transportation. We've enjoyed a good close working relationship with DOT, regardless of presidential administration. We are a proudly nonpartisan or bipartisan firm. I've been doing this since the Obama administration, but our firm's history goes back to Bush the father. And we will be here to provide continuity throughout the midterm elections, presidential transitions. And so we look forward to working with each of you over the weeks and months ahead. Of course, we're here to represent Kitsap Transit directly. However, John has shared that various board members have been coming to DC, so please do feel free to reach out to us anytime you're here in town, happy to get together with you to talk through infrastructure policy or to connect you with folks on Capitol Hill as we're doing the business of Kitsap Transit back here in Washington, D.C. So with that, look forward to working with each of you as time goes forward. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have about our operations.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. Anyone have questions?
One thing I would add is when I first met Jen was as part of the Washington State Transit Association. Her firm represents WSTA back in DC. So I've had a working relationship with Jen now for 5-6 years at least. And I've always been very, very impressed with her organizational skills and her advocacy work that she's been doing for the association. I will also add that during our checking references, if you will, Jen represents Pierce Transit, and I reached out to Mike Griffiths, who's the GM of Pierce, and asked what his feelings were of Jen, and I will quote him, the best thing's the sliced bread, end quote. So she comes with lots of good experience and highly recommended because everybody, I think, likes sliced bread. So, Jen, thank you very much. And as you had indicated, for the board members, if any of you have an opportunity to go back to DC, reach out and we'll make sure that we can try to make a connection. Jen is obviously pretty busy, but your office is just a few blocks from the White House, isn't it? If I remember correctly.
Yes. So anytime you're here in town, we're located at 15th and M Street. We can see the Washington Monument and the White House from some parts of our offices. And just to share, please consider our offices a home base of operations away from home and here in the other Washington. We also are, just for your awareness, in case it's ever of any use to anyone, we are co-located with the Madison Meridian Hotel here in Washington, D.C. So if you are ever in need of big meeting space for receptions, or again, just a place to stay during the day, we have our offices, but we also have access to those business meeting areas in the hotel as well. And so just want to offer that as an amenity. Our team back here is 4 strong. And so John and his team there are already receiving communications from our staff on a daily, if not weekly basis about the latest federal developments. We're happy to add any of you to those communications if that would be helpful to you all. And again, we'll make sure that you're aware of not only the latest transit or transportation developments, but if something like the housing bill that's moving right now has any nexus to transit-oriented development, as one example, we'll be made sure to make you aware of those developments for your awareness, so the agency can really fully leverage any and all federal resources that are out there and accessible to you all.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much
Great.
for your time today. Great seeing you all.
Thank you so much. Welcome. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Looking forward to working with you all as well.
Yeah, we have one question.
It's actually a question for John. What's the earmark that we've asked Jen to help with?
Well, it's the congressional earmarks that they have available, discretionary funding, and we've asked for some funding to work on. We've got some replacement work that needs to be done on the Port Orchard Ferry dock, so we put in a request for funding to help with that particular project. So it's kind of a big scale maintenance project.
Just like the deck surface or something?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, it's a deck structure that's there.
Is there a
Okay.
place where we could leverage federal funding for the project on the Seattle waterfront?
Well, when we're ready,
SF in Seattle and us?
yeah, when we're ready for that, and we've already, I've briefed Jen on a lot of our projects that we've got going, and the Peel Dock is one of them in Seattle. So, and that project, as we continue to go forward, we're in partnership, if you will, with the Federal Transit Administration, so that when we're ready to ask for funding, that is going to be teed up and meet all of the requirements. So. Good seeing you, Jen. Thank you.
Great,
Good
thank
seeing
you.
you
Have a
all.
good conference.
Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
All right, now we're on to the KPFF presentation about our County Ferry Service Study.
Yes, and we've got Kelly on board here that, as you all know, we've been working on, or she's been working on the development of our intra-county POF program. And Stephanie, I don't know if you want to introduce that more than Stephanie's been kind of leading the charge on this particular effort. So
yeah, so I don't really have too much more to introduce other than working the last number of months on the intra-county study. As you know, we had some working groups that we brought together to discuss the different routes. And this is kind of our final report of what we found is feasible, as well as some of the potential costing infrastructure that could go along with this. And other than that, I think it's just turn it over to Kelly, let her go through her slides.
Kelly, go ahead.
Well, thank you both. Let's see, are you seeing the correct screen here?
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me today. I'll give a summary of the process that we used in the study and walk through our findings from route analysis. And at the end, we'll have some time for discussion and questions. So starting with a quick overview, and some of this information will be a reminder from our update first shared in July of last year when we were in the first phase of the study. The goal was to explore the feasibility of potential new passenger-only ferry service within Kitsap County. So we began in phase 1 with a list of 3 routes that were included in the project scope, which were Bremerton to Manchester, Bremerton to Silverdale, and Bremerton to Bainbridge Island. So we also took a look at what other route opportunities should be considered through review of Kitsap County commute travel patterns, landing site opportunities, and public and stakeholder feedback. We ended up with a long list of potential routes and screened those, landed on 2 options that were moved forward to the second phase. And for those routes, we developed potential service profiles, estimated demand levels, and identified vessel and landing site requirements, as well as estimated costs. We conducted an online public survey in June of last year that received over 1,900 responses. Overall, the survey demonstrated that there was excitement and interest in POF service from folks that took the survey from around the county. Overall, the Bremerton to Bainbridge Island route received the highest level of interest from responses in all locations except for Silverdale and Manchester. And for Silverdale, found that while interest in the Silverdale route was lower than for Bainbridge Island, a higher portion of respondents indicated that their typical travel between those 2 locations was for commute purposes, as compared to the Bainbridge route. And additionally, many of those respondents, around half, indicated that they would likely take that route to connect to fast ferry service to Seattle. Of the write-in suggested route options, Bremerton to Poolsbo was kind of a runaway favorite, receiving the most suggestions. So as Stephanie mentioned, we also met with an advisory group throughout the study at 3 different points. And the goal of the meetings was for the study team to report out on findings to representatives from the Kitsap area and gather insight from them, as well as their input on the study. So the orange box on the screen here highlights some of the key feedback that we received from the advisory group. Firstly, the need to focus the intention of POF service, whether it's aimed at serving commuters or supporting tourism and growth, or some combination or other goals. The advisory group also pointed out a lot of opportunities for POF connections to meet the needs of Kitsap residents and visitors, and noted that in future phases, a more robust engagement process along the lines of what was used during the fast ferry implementation could probably help identify what ridership levels would look like for some of those recreational and discretionary trips that we weren't able to capture in the commute data used as part of this study. We also heard that there are numerous environmental concerns and tribal resources located on the routes that would need to be important considerations in future phases. So moving into the second phase of the study, I'll walk through the two routes that we looked at in detail. The first route connects Bremerton to Bainbridge Island. We looked at other potential landing sites on the island, but heard a strong preference for WSF's terminal in Winslow because of the existing transit and upland connections at the landing site. So co-location of a POF terminal with the WSF terminal would require a major capital project to install a float and connect passengers to the overhead walkway that was recently completed there. We had an initial discussion with WSF terminal staff to walk through a concept layout and also heard some operational limitations with potential POF service co-located there. For both routes, major improvements would also be required on the Bremerton end of the route to make the B float operational for passenger service, to reduce movement on the float, likely requiring replacement, and also improve the ramps for safe passenger loading and unloading. Added surface would also require added moorage space for vessels and expanded vessel maintenance capacity. So as you can see, a key opportunity for this route is the travel time savings, especially considering the traffic conditions that I'm sure many of you have experienced traveling between Bainbridge and Bremerton and the limitations of the Agate Pass Bridge. The estimated ridership shown here at 670 riders per day includes existing commute trips that were estimated to switch to ferry, as well as induced demand, which is the estimated new commute trips that could be generated by the new travel option. So it is important to note that induced demand likely materializes over time. It's not there on day one of a new service. Wake restrictions through Rich Passage in the middle of the route here impact the number of transits and types of vessels that could be used on the route. So for this route, we assume two vessel types. The first is a diesel option, would be the Rich Passage vessel class, which is a proven technology that meets the weight criteria of the route. And we also looked at a smaller electric hydrofoil vessel for both routes at a 75 passenger size that would be capable of making a round trip on a single charge from the Bremerton end of the route. The second route option connects Bremerton and Silverdale. So the assumed landing site in Silverdale is the existing dock at the waterfront park, which would require some minor improvements to support service and reduce the slope of the ramp connecting the pier to the float area to make it more accessible for passengers. And we also assumed implementation of a shuttle to connect the landing site to the transit center because of the limited parking and other connections near the waterfront there. Port Washington Narrows, which is about half of the route length, is anticipated to have environmental concerns and navigational channels, which would limit vessel wakes and the speeds at which vessels could operate safely. So while the ferry trip time is less time competitive than for the Bainbridge route, there is more existing commute demand along this corridor. So the ridership analysis modeled that 390 riders per day on average, and did not indicate much induced demand for this route, which is likely due to the existing transit options that travel pretty frequently along this corridor. So moving on to implementation needs and considerations for the route. This slide presents a summary of key findings related to potential service startup. So firstly, KT is not well positioned to operate these routes as a pilot service. Vessels in the KT fleet are all assigned to current routes and can't be pulled away to be on new service without impacting existing services. Additionally, as discussed, both routes are anticipated to have both weight restrictions and vessel speed requirements to maintain time competitive travel. There aren't any existing landing sites that are well suited to POF service without improvements, which requires permitting and funding and time requirements there. So a key next step would be coordination with the landing site jurisdictions to understand their level of interest and support in POF service, and also what those potential landing site use could look like. All of these items contribute to a level of significant investment needed to start up and maintain service, as we will get into on the next slides. So before moving forward with implementation, it's recommended that a high-level capital and operations funding plan be prepared to understand how potential service could be funded. Following that, the next step would be a detailed business and implementation plan. This study estimated costs for a service scenario based on planning level vessel characteristics and landing site improvements, but future phases would advance to a preliminary design level that would support refined operating costs and would also be used for the environmental reviews for the service and routes, or for the landing sites and route. So estimated costs as part of this study show capital improvements ranging from 40 to 82 million, depending on the vessel type and the route, with operating costs ranging from 3.7 to 4.8 million per year. These costs are all in 2025 level dollars and would need to be escalated depending on the year of planned implementation. So the table shown here provides a summary of the costs by route and by vessel type. The two columns on your left show the diesel vessel options for the Bainbridge and then the Silverdale route. The two columns on the right show the same 75 passenger electric hydrofoil vessel for both routes. Costs reflect implementation of a single route as a standalone. There would be some economies of scale for two routes implemented at the same time, since the costs of the Bremerton improvements would be shared. And in the 75 passenger electric vessel scenario, it could be provided by a fleet of 3 vessels instead of 2 vessels for a single route, as to have one in service and one as a backup. So you can see that compared to conventional diesel, there's some operating cost savings provided by use of electric propulsion, which does account for the accrual for battery replacement 10 years into the life of the vessel. Crew labor costs for Silverdale are anticipated to be higher with higher operating speed, but crew levels would need to be confirmed with the Coast Guard with final vessel design. And capital investment costs for both routes for the electric option show a pretty wide range of costs for electric charging infrastructure. Those costs would be narrowed as more is known about other electric infrastructure projects going on in the area and as design is advanced. So compared to KT's existing POF services, study routes project a higher cost per rider between 220% and 250% higher, primarily due to the lower estimated demand forecast in the study. As previously discussed, the next step toward implementation would be completion of a detailed business plan. However, we'd likely want to take a look at potential funding before moving forward to take on that analysis. The durations shown in orange here for environmental review and agreements and funding plan development could potentially be on the optimistic side based on recent experience with the funding climate and KT's experience with fast ferry implementation. So those durations could be longer. Note that design could be started without full funding in hand using planning dollars. However, funding would need to be secured before procurement and construction of landing sites and vessels would begin. All right, thank you all, and we have some time for questions.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. And I know Mayor Wheeler has the first question.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. That was detailed, enough information to start being able to make decisions. So, as we've been, I'd have to refresh my memory, John, but we have a long-range plan that includes bus rapid transit. And the longer, at least, and this is right now, as we're trying to develop infrastructure plans in the city of Bremerton, it's becoming tougher and tougher to envision removing a lane from typical commuter traffic and making it dedicated just to bus rapid transit. And with more people moving in, it's becoming, tougher and tougher to envision that actually happening. Doesn't mean it can't, but this, with the fast ferries, that is a opportunity to have a dedicated point A to point B without either creating a new lane, which is, cost prohibitive, or removing one, which is becoming, increasingly, I won't say unlikely. I don't know the plan how we would do that yet. Would the next phase, or has that been calculated into the feasibility of fast ferries, being a viable transportation alternative?
To answer your question directly, no. Bus rapid transit, bus rapid transit is a concept of service delivery that would be quite a ways out in our future.
Mm-hmm.
To qualify as a bus rapid transit, you have to have buses running about every 15 minutes, and they have to be running long hours and 7 days a week. So right now, the demand is not there on any of our corridors. We have peak demands at certain times, but not during a duration that it would need to be to qualify as a bus rapid transit. So certainly if we were to put something in place, like say the Silverdale to Bremerton, that certainly would have an immediate benefit in the sense that it would probably push off the need for bus rapid transit into the future, simply because we'd be kind of splitting the demand as you suggest. Now, in our long-range plan, the bus rapid transits were envisioned 305 and essentially up 303, is it?
Mm-hmm. 303, yeah.
Up through Wheaton and up into the Silverdale area. So again, it could reduce the demand for bus rapid transit on both of those corridors.
Mm-hmm.
Bainbridge to Bremerton certainly would siphon off a fair amount of traffic that is there now and into the future for people that are coming to Bremerton. That wouldn't solve for those that are going to Paulsboro, Kingston, or even Silverdale. So, but it certainly will have an impact.
Yeah. All right. I mean, it just, we're land constrained.
Mhm.
And so just that's it, Chair.
I would add that to put in a true bus rapid transit is not an inexpensive project in itself. You mentioned a dedicated lane as one aspect of it, but there's a lot of additional infrastructure improvements that would need to be made along the corridor.
Yeah.
That would possibly be comparable to what you're talking about for improving the BOF service in Kitsap County. And just capital investments alone.
Any other questions? Mayor Marawaki?
Yeah, thanks. Can we go back to the slide that showed the comparisons of the cost of the different routes? Now you had, yeah, that'd be good right there. That's really sobering, folks. It's kind of mind-blowing. The vessels are at least 28, 25 million, and I'm talking about Bainbridge Island, and then the capital. That's just extraordinary expense. I mean, and so that to me is almost, I mean, let's finish the study, but we're having constant pressures to have more bus service, and especially on our island, to have more. And I wonder what you can do with $25 million. That's the capital part, let alone the operations. Secondly, I really have I just don't know how the Bainbridge Island ferry site would have a location for another ferry that would be close and you could transfer over. But so those right off the top, just my common sense radar comes in, and I, it's let's finish the study. But to me, it's a non-starter. I just don't see how it would work. I don't see how it would if there even could be the facility on Bainbridge. And then the other is so what's the route between to Liberty Bay to Bremerton? Anyway, that route. If Rich Passage is a highway, that thing looks like a bike trail. I mean, it's narrow, and the wake problems we have on a very large, relatively large, wide body of water compared to that place, is that thing going to like go like 4 knots or something? I mean, and those are going to be waterfront homes all the way up and down that narrow corridor. I don't know how you can have head times that um, could even compensate for a bus. I mean, I think that thing would go really slow through there and if there is a technology that could have a low wake that could go through that narrow of a corridor, that's the one we should be using on Ridge Passage, for goodness sakes. So I just have there's a lot of questions on this that at first blush, I just have a lot of concerns. And for our consultant, you had a quote of like 250% higher. You said it kind of quickly. I didn't quite understand what that meant. 250% higher for this ferry over bus. What was that 250% greater number referring to?
That was referring to the cost per rider compared to the actual cost per rider experienced on KT's other ferry routes. So
Right,
largely that figure is driven by the lower estimated demand.
And if I may, Chair, if you could go back to you had a slide about how the agency just simply doesn't have the bandwidth or capacity. You had a narrative there. Yeah, that kind of those things. I appreciate your candor on the headlines. Uh, it's probably stuff that many of us maybe didn't want to hear, but that just pops out right ahead to me, especially when we're challenged to just enhance the route service we have, to consider even this. And I would hope we're trying to enhance and make more reliable the already existing fast ferry service we have. So to me, it's just really sobering, and I'll support going on with a study, but in my mind right now, it's kind of a non-starter. Thank you, Chair.
If I may, Mayor Moraraki, I think it's important to make sure to understand that the agency currently is not in a position to be able to support it because we don't have the vessels primarily.
Yeah.
All of our vessels are committed to our existing routes. And obviously we don't have currently an excess amount of staff, ready to jump in and operate some additional vessels. I think the other important component with that is that currently we're not situated financially to be able to support the additional runs. It would have to require additional revenues coming in to be able to support that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody is clear on our current situation that we're in today, and our abilities to move this forward if we were to do that.
Thank you, Director. That's exactly what I was thinking. So appreciate that.
Mayor Buton.
I concur with 90% of what Clarence said there. But let's continue the body of work. It took us a decade to start this up initially. So it's good information to have. And who knows, a decade or two down the road, we've done a body of work. This is what it could look like. To the enhancing the existing service, that's really, I think, where we should be looking if we're going to do anything. When I'm attending PSRC meetings, I'm taking one of the sailings that the Washington State is funding for us. And I'm seeing that boat is nearly full. There's demand for those sailings that are going to go away in August, I think our community is going to be disappointed when we take those sailings away that the state has funded. So I'm all for, if we're going to do something, I think it should be enhancing what we have and making it more frequent and available to more people.
Councilmember Rosa Pepe?
I think I'm going to be Johnny come lately, because I think it's been said by Clarence and Rob, the comments on it. However, I don't think was a wasted exercise by any stretch of the imagination, because I think we should always be looking at the future. I mean, the number that struck me was, ridership, because, what's projected, and you say 20 sailing, 600 people, and everybody can do the math, but that's based on today, not, like Rob said, in the future. Additionally, and I don't know what the comments you got, Greg. Greg and I both spoke at a, lack of better words, convention of people that were interested in public service. And it was the day that I spoke, most of my questions, believe it or not, was about the ferry service and Port Orchard and Bremerton's impact in operations with the ferry service. And of course, part of that I had to, say that, from my standpoint, Port Orchard doesn't have a lot of interaction with the state ferry service, but our interaction with Kitsap Transit and the communities is tremendous. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a great putting the toe in the water. And I don't think this is something that we should shelve it right now. I think that we should at least have some point in time to say, hey, we're going to review this in a year, a couple of years, whatever is appropriate, on that side of the coin to update it. Because we're a growing community, and we're going to continue to grow in all those aspects. So it's not a wasted exercise. It's probably one that we need to make a mark and say we need to revisit this. But I think it's good information and a good starting point. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, just in a couple of the comments I'd like to respond to. One, Mayor Patanzo mentioned that we took a decade to get our fast ferries in operation, but I remind folks that a good portion of that decade was studying wakes and wake impacts and rich passage. It wasn't really, building an operation, if you will. I think, in my personal opinion, is that it wasn't until we were able to show the community that we could run fast ferries at speed without damaging the beaches that the community finally agreed to support the creation of that program. The other thing I would remind folks in the timing, Kelly mentioned that the environmental work that would need to be done to be able to get this into operation, additional service, environmental, putting that dock in, which would require an additional dock next to the Washington State Ferries Terminal in Bainbridge Island. That one in particular will probably take the full amount of time that she had mentioned, 2 to 3 years to get all the permitting and everything through. Now, we've had preliminary discussions with Washington State Ferries to make sure that they're open to that concept if in fact it's something that they wanted or we wanted to pursue, and they are. But like what we're doing in Southworth, it's like we're willing, but it's on your plate to go through and get that put together. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention. And I also just want to remind folks that in our current funding scheme for the passenger-only ferry, there's not a lot of extra funding now to do this or even replace the service that Washington State is currently paying for. We're going to be talking here before too much longer about the capital replacement program for the ferry boats, which is an issue that we're going to be faced with on our existing operations. So, I just wanted to put it in context with what we're doing today and what we're doing, could do in the future. As mentioned, Kelly indicated that the state law that allowed us to create the entity that we have now allows us with voter approval to go up to 0.4%. We're currently at 0.3. So right now, the only funding opportunity we would have if the voters approved would be that additional 1/10, unless we went to the legislature and asked for additional authority that the voters would approve. So, these are just kind of the check-in points that I wanted to make sure and share that folks were aware of.
Mary, you have a follow-up comment, and then
Yeah.
I have some.
Okay.
So I won't. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I was listening to the practical side of this study and when it would be ready to implement. The thing we cannot ignore, we live the 303 corridor. There's thousands of units coming in. Those properties and that housing will be filled. It'll be workforce housing. Critical needs in the shipyard, contractors coming in, healthcare workers where I use critical need once, but we're critically short on healthcare workers. So that means we don't have enough housing today to run a city and a county properly with the appropriate amount of workforce. So we can't ignore future thinking. We are a unique county, as in we're the 5th highest population. It's a designated rural county. So and as much as we're trying to centralize growth in growth centers, the growth patterns won't change too much. So in other words, we're going to be serving an entire county with transit. And so again, adding extra lanes, cost prohibitive, especially in our environment. Subtracting a lane for bus rapid transit to get people from point A, and this is our economy. This is going to be our workforce moving around and the people living here, or waterways. And so right now it's setting the table for a future decision, future state. But the facts are growth, land restraints, constraints, and an economy that needs to be supported in some way. So I fully support continuing on this path. Again, living in the 303 corridor, I see this every day. What's happening?
Commissioner?
I guess I just want to throw out that of course, we have transportation and infrastructure and workforce and housing constraints, but we also have financial constraints. And it's important for the board to be looking at the future. But I see this study more as a tool for catalyzing a more concrete discussion about how we're going to afford the system we have today and how we're going to incrementally expand today's system to meet needs, let alone chasing new projects. So I urge caution as we through, and there's nothing wrong. It's done every year of elected groups saying, we're not ready for this now, but we might be later. Let's put it to the side and focus on managing for today and the next 5 to 10 years. So my question is, when will this study be done so we can have our final conversation how to move forward?
Well, this is pretty much what has been funded. So this first phase is pretty much complete. For us to go beyond this would require us allocating additional resources to support that.
John, was the allocation from the legislature for the phase 2 of this then? Or is it just to continue to pay for what this has to pay for this?
The funding that the legislature gave us funded this operation, or this portion, if you will, or this amount of study.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative of this study, so I'm going to take my moment now because everyone I think knows I'm supportive of the future of ferries, and I think absolutely it's going to be a substantial investment in our future at the point we choose to go forward with something like this. But we are currently planning, we're in the process of our Silverdale Regional Center plan and how we comply with the Growth Management Act to densify Central Kitsap. And the ferry to Silverdale has been a substantial part of that plan as we, to your point, Mayor, figure out how we attract people to live in Silverdale and create that workforce housing so that we have a way to move people between our two largest employers, the hospital and the shipyard, especially as we grow, and we know we're going to grow and we want that growth to be in our growth centers. So, so it really has been part of that plan so that we can plan for transit-oriented development around a ferry system, around our transit system. I appreciate that you mentioned the shuttle, because I think parking in Silverdale to the ferry is going to be one of the things that is necessary. In the last few years, we've had our pop-up ferry, kind of our experiment, our pilot program there, and parking has been one of those things. We've had the shuttle between the mall and the ferry, pop-up ferry, which has been really successful. And then also to your point, Councilmember Rosa Pepe, about being on panels. Last year, I was on a panel for the Mosquito Fleet Festival, and there's so much interest in bringing back that kind of nostalgic water transportation. And I think we are kind of a ferry culture that you'll find that people will not ride a bus, but they'll ride a ferry. So we were kind of capitalizing on that with our pop-up ferries and how the great interest in that. So I think as we move forward, I think we're planning for the next 20 years that I'm appreciative of this as being part of that conversation, and also recognizing that it would really be up to the voters, and it will, and I'm glad that we have a new federal lobbyist for us, because I think it will be a federal investment if we were to move forward on something like a more of an interlocal ferry system. But so no real, I do actually, Kelly, could you go back to the Silverdale slide? I didn't write down quick enough how long it would take to get between Silverdale and Bremerton. Was it like, because I know when we're on the Carlisle, it's between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on the wake and on the tides.
19
minutes. Okay, great.
Yeah, and this does assume a ferry that's capable of operating with a low wake on hydrofoils at 24 knots. Through some discussions, we kind of identified 24 knots as the ceiling for safe navigation, given the vessel traffic and bridges and narrow waterway.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think that is also part of the challenge too, is Silverdale, because a ferry would have to be, you know, it has to take you less time to take a ferry than you to drive. But I think what we found with the pop-up ferry, going to using it for tourism for the Blackberry Festival, we ended up with having more attendees to the Blackberry Festival because they didn't have to park in Bremerton.
Mhm.
And one of the things I continue on, like when we get our new, like we have new Captain Berg, always educating, but I also think consideration may be the Navy, as we're all planning for PSYOP and the influx of workforce and how the workforce is going to get to Bremerton, and that this could also be an opportunity if the Navy were to see it as a way to invest in our community to help with a passenger-only ferry and the infrastructure needed in Silverdale and Bremerton to get workforce to the shipyard. So that's my soapbox for this morning. Anyone else before we close this? Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for this presentation. John, can we all have will you send us a copy of this?
Oh,
slide deck?
absolutely. Yeah, we'd be happy to. And, you know, as I indicated, this kind of completes this effort. So unless I hear some other direction from the board, we'll get you this information and we can have time to sit and digest it. But we're not planning to go any further with it right now until.
Yeah, I think it'll be of interest to our consultants that are working on the Silverdale Regional.
Yeah.
We've had participation from Kitsap Transit with that as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be happy to give copies to whomever. So, and I probably would not be doing my job if I didn't do a shameless plug for the bus side of the world. You mentioned Mayor 303. One of the things that is between now and Bus Rapid Transit is any opportunities that we can do to improve the quality, if you will, of service. And one of the options is signal preemption. And we have that, and wherever there's a traffic signal, if we can provide an advantage to the bus rider over the private vehicle and then by themselves. It will help enhance and make buses more attractive. So I just throw that out as we have that today that we could do if we could get concurrence that the transit should be able to.
Don't you do that on 305?
We have the equipment to do it on 305, but not all of the jurisdictions allow transits to take advantage of it because it does have an impact on coordination efforts and things of that.
I always try to get behind a Kitsap transit. I thought.
Well, there are places
Thing.
like, for example, at 305 and Suquamish Way, where we have that queue jumping lane there that gets us an advantage of the folks. We get a green light before everyone else. Those are the little things that we can do that can provide an advantage. And when we did the initial study many, many years ago, Opticom would improve the travel time by a minimum of 10%. So those are the little things that can happen today that could make transit a little more attractive. And now again, that's the bus side. So
I think Clarence had a question. Did you still have a question, Mayor?
Oh, no, I was just John took it away from me. But at that Suquamish stop, it's really exciting to see the Kitsap transit bus on the right get that green light. And it's halfway up to Mossy before I can even leave the light. So it's pretty exciting to see that. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. I'm still going to work on my vision of being able to take a ferry from Seattle to Bremerton to Silverdale and then be able to walk on the path through all the way through Silverdale up to the transit center. Then you can take a bus back if you want. But I'm still working on that vision.
That's what it takes is a vision.
That's right. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly. We really appreciate
Thank you all.
all
Thanks,
this.
Kelly.
Thank you. And then also thank you to the stakeholders that were involved in this. Will they also receive a copy of this so they have our group
We can
that-
certainly make it available.
that
if
would be
they're
great.
interested, yeah.
follow up with them? Thank you. All right, now on to our discussion of our legislative session with our state lobbyist, Dylan. Thank you.
I'm
for
glad to
being
see
here.
Dylan is still awake.
Barely.
You can
Yeah.
see how much work we're gonna need you
Uh,
for if we're gonna do anything.
Yeah, good thing. I don't know. We might need to put the kibosh on that for a year at least. We'll see. We'll get into that. So obviously, we wrapped up on Thursday. They adjourned about 8:30 p.m. on Thursday after kind of a whirlwind 60-day session. And I know Commissioner Rolfus and others who are familiar with that know that, the cadence and tempo of short sessions and long sessions are very different. And, this year was, I would say a typical short session, but some of the work product that they did was a little bit out of the ordinary. And obviously, almost concluding with a 24.5-hour debate on the income tax on earnings over $1 million. That did end up passing. It's on its way to the governor. And obviously, that's going to be a memorable outcome from this session, one way or the other, recognizing that it'll likely be challenged in court and go to the ballot, if not both. And one thing to keep in mind from that bill, and you probably have seen this from your city and county lobbyists as well, is that there was a reduction in the sales tax component that is baked into that income tax bill. And so cities, counties, and transits who operate on sales tax revenue would see a reduction starting in 2029 should this bill actually take effect and survive court challenges and ballot challenges. So I don't know how much of an impact that would have on Kitsap Transit directly, but it would essentially repeal 90% of the sales taxes that were passed last year on services, as well as adding a few new things like hygiene products, deodorant, diapers, things like that would become sales tax exempt. So estimates I saw were 275 million-ish to the locals, kind of an aggregate, so as a negative hit. So the legislature giveth and taketh away. So, but obviously that was kind of the big picture. You've got a report in the written report for any budget geeks out there who just kind of want to see what they did and how they did it this year with respect to the operating budget, the capital budget. I'll focus a little bit on the transportation budget right now. guess it's a good thing that we got our study money then, so we can pay back our consultant, but 124K was rolled over and reappropriated for the intra-county POF study. Another significant investment this year in transit that'll impact Kitsap directly is a pilot program dealing with transit passes with Olympic College. And so this is something that really, the discussion was for a statewide bill. During the course of the legislation, it was identified that really all but a couple of agencies already have programs in place. King County Metro has a ton of community and technical colleges, and so they have some more work to do on this. But Kitsap was one of the other ones with Olympic College that didn't already have a program. I know it's been discussed. I know it's been in motion in some way, shape, or form for years, but this will hopefully put the finishing touches on that with a couple $100,000 to come to us for a pilot program on that end. And so before getting into the bills, the only other thing I'll mention on the budget side is that the budget this year did fully restore kind of out year funding for grant programs for transit, things that had been reduced in last year and the first year of this biennial budget. They've kind of plussed that back up and gotten those back to where they were originally intended. So a pretty solid year all told from the transit side, and therein ends the good news. And now we get to the rest. So
Before you move on
Yeah.
to the rest, for the Olympic College, do you have a plan? Are we ready for that?
Well, we've been working on a plan with the college. Sanjay has been kind of spearheading that. That was part of the discussion that we had last year when we did our meeting with Olympic College, the lunch where we encourage everybody to come to the college without their automobiles. So we've been talking with the college on a program, and I've been keeping the interim president abreast of what's going on with this legislative session. So she and I have talked half a dozen times over the last month or so. So she's excited. We're going to have to sit down with them and work through some of the specifics. We have some requirements, if you will. We want to be able to use our current ORCA card so that we can actually track the usage. There will be some costs on their side to disperse the cards. And part of this 200,000 that has been allocated to us, I've set aside 15 to 20,000 to go to the college to help cover some of those administrative expenses. So yeah, we've got the framework. There's more detail that has to be worked out, and OC is ready to jump on board and work with us.
So will it also, for the Poulsbo campus, it could also, can we also use it for the Western students that are going to the OC building? Like, we're not going to discriminate against students based on what their programming is. About the
A lot of that, we're going to have to work with OC so that, how they can distinguish. As far as I'm
they'll give
concerned,
out the passes.
yeah, if they go to one of the OC campuses, they will get a pass other than the Silverdale OC campus, or not Silverdale, excuse me, the Sheldon is kind of an outlier that we'll have to work through and figure out.
And this includes ferry as well, then they could.
Well, that's yet to be determined. It'll be our local ferries for sure, but whether or not they are drawing from the east side of the Puget Sound for students to come to OC, they may, but again, that's something that we'll have to work with OC to see how big of a student body that they have coming on the ferry boats. So it's really focused more on getting transportation to and from the campus than it is to provide weekend outings and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Part of what we're hoping to do with this is to determine out of their entire student body of what 3,500 kids or something around there, how many will actually take advantage of it. That will help us then figure out, after this funding goes away, what would the real cost be for us to do something, and how could we structure something to where, like the UPass, where the students just pay a nominal fee at registration that covers the free rides for everybody.
Thank you.
And-
More to come.
And you'll get a chance to report on that, since there's a reporting requirement due with
Exactly.
us and King County Metro by January 30th of next year. So right after the session starts, before they get into their budget time next year. So on the legislation side, start with kind of the budget adjacent bills that passed. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I want to leave some time to talk about mosquito fleet in a moment. But 2711 transportation resources, this is the trailer bill, follow up to the big tax bill from last year. There are 3 programs in there that were impacted directly for transit, expanding eligibility of the transit grant program to include safety elements, safety and security elements, clarifying how transit annexation works. I probably shouldn't be an issue probably for us here at Kitsap, since I believe we're already countywide and don't need to do any of that. But then transit bus toll exemption authority, last year they negated any exemptions for transits crossing certain toll bridges. This brings back the authority for the Transportation Commission to at least explore that and decide whether it would make sense to provide those exemptions or not in the future. 2251 is the other budget related one. This is a bill on Climate Commitment Act accounts. The takeaway from this bill is that there is a looming cliff when it comes to CCA revenues. And that was always the intent of the program, is that as emissions were reduced, then the revenue would go down. There is a cliff identified probably in about 2030 to where funding is going to go way down. What this bill did is rearranged how the funding mechanism works. It sets aside specific budget amounts in the operating, capital, and transportation budgets, whereas currently there are just 5 different nebulous revolving accounts. And so they're really trying to hone in on how big is the pie going to be for each one of these moving forward. Obviously, that's going to have an impact on transit because transit's received a fair amount of money under CCA for capital in specific, but also some operating with the free ride, the fare free for youth, things like that. So as you dive into kind of the future of transit funding, keeping in mind what may or may not be available from the state is going to be a key component on that end. And so those are kind of the big issues there. And now turning to the bill that had nothing but risk for Kitsap Transit, since we're already operating, is House Bill 1923. So Commissioner Walters, you mentioned the mosquito fleet issue earlier. We know that Representative Nance has been a champion of this. His legislation, House Bill 1923, was a holdover from last year. It passed the House last year, pretty strong, overwhelming local option to expand certain POF district authority. And it's probably a good time to remind the board that there are at least 4 elements or 4 possible statutes that can govern local passenger-only ferry usage. One is in 2003, I believe, PTBAs were authorized. This is the one that Kitsap Transit's using right now. Authorized a PTBA to go up to 4/10 of sales tax. That's the one that we're using. Counties also have county ferry authority. There's some port district authority right now. And then in 2015, as we were gearing up, we actually pushed and passed a law in Olympia for the creation of something called passenger-only ferry districts. That only applies to Kitsap Transit. It was meant as a pilot program. It would have allowed us to set boundaries. It includes up to 3/10 of a cent for sales tax, some parking tax issues, and some other issues. We did not end up utilizing that statute, even though we were the ones who pushed for it. That's the statute that Rep. Nance is looking to expand, is the 2015 statute. He would include counties, port districts, city transits, all up and down the Puget Sound and Grays Harbor into that. And that's the vision that people have been kind of clamoring for at the local level, is that local option. Bill passed the House last year, got over to the Senate Transportation Committee, did not advance last year. Starts over again this year, passes out of the House, gets over to the Senate Transportation Committee, has a public hearing, and that's when the funny monkey business started on this one. And I think a legitimate question for Representative Nance is what outreach he did with the Senate in the interim, because it sure seemed like there was a disconnect there. And the reason that I wanted to highlight a couple of things on this bill is we saw a direction from the legislature that would not be beneficial, were it to be expanded to impact Kitsap Transit's operations. The amendments that were proposed by the Senate Transportation Committee included a build in Washington requirement, which would negate federal funding. It included a prohibition on new state funding for POF starting in 2028. It included a requirement that all vessels be zero emission, which is not necessarily technology that is either financially feasible or practically feasible in some areas. And it also shifted the funding mechanism away from sales tax to a property tax, the ever popular property tax. And so all of those are works in progress. Obviously, things can be discussed and maneuvered, but I highlight that for this board because if that's a direction that the legislature wants to go in the future, there would be potentially significant impacts to Kitsap's operation. Keeping in mind that the bill itself did not deal with the statute that we are utilizing. Nonetheless, something as a policy matter that we're going to have to maintain a very close eye on. And so, yeah, there's obviously moving parts in the legislature. We're going to see a fair amount of turnover this year in the elections. And I would anticipate additional turnover even next year in an off year when we see some local elections, including one where the current Senate Transportation Committee chair is eyeing potential county seat in 2027. And so up in Snohomish County. And so there's obviously things that are going to be moving on this, but wanted to make sure the board was aware of the discussion so we're not caught off guard by anything that may come up. All of this was really originated because of this bill that put a spotlight on the passenger-only ferry system currently in Washington. One other amendment worth mentioning is one that shouldn't bother us, which is some orca protections, basically codifying the best practices that my understanding is Kitsap Transit already utilizes. So, but that's obviously important to some other environmental communities. And we saw in the intra-county POF study highlighting some of the environmental concerns, orca protection, things like that, especially for cross sound is going to be important. But the other environmental and tribal impacts of an expanded POF for mosquito fleet is obviously a policy matter to discuss as well. So that's what I wanted to highlight this morning. A handful of other bills that didn't end up passing, you can take a look at. Board governance had some discussion again this year. But as we head into the off season, just some timing elements for everybody. Governor has 20 days to sign bills. Most of the bills that were policy in nature will take effect July or June 11th if they weren't specified. May obviously is the filing deadline, and we already have some movement afoot in our local areas with Representative Valdez, formerly Caldier, announcing that she will not be seeking re-election. And so we're going to have some new faces next year that we're going to be working with, both in our specific area, but also statewide. So would welcome any questions or thoughts on this.
Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yeah, I just, we just were talking about the future with the recurrent study. And then of course the comments are brought up that we do have to keep our feet firmly planted in the moment, and nobody would disagree. So, when we move forward, I think we got to keep that in mind and not put too much political waste it potentially, or scorch the earth with a future state when we have a lot of work to do together locally. And so that's, I was supportive of the bill, crashed, and then personally not liking what I'm seeing, but also I don't know how we're going to navigate that yet, except doing, like you said, potential turnover and what that might look like. But we've got needs today, especially with transit. We do have needs, just shoring up what we have. John, you mentioned 303. We have to work with what we have to maximize our efficiency. So.
And Mayor, I'd like to just comment on that briefly, that the issue that's at play here, despite what may have been put out in the Kitsap Sun or other publications, the very real concern here from the state is that our Washington State ferry system has significant capital needs moving forward, and things that distract from that this is where you saw the concern about state funding. we saw it here with any intra-county, what the terminal might have to look like over at, Bainbridge to accommodate some of that. And so the overlapping interest here is of concern to the state, and it's a very valid concern as they look to try to build out their fleet and make sure that we actually have our WSF service. And so it's not that there was an antagonism toward passenger-only ferries or Rep. Nance or anybody like that. It was simply, that we have bigger issues sometimes at the state level that aren't hyper-local, and so we need to appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll just close, Dylan. I understand that the electrification conversation, that's it's coming up more and more, and the costs. And so separate from some of the other stuff. No, thank you.
Madam Chair, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. I wanted a couple of things, and Dylan, please correct me if I'm not recalling correctly. But we were talking about earlier about passenger-only ferries, voter support. It was 10 years in the making. What we had as a foundation here is that Washington State Ferries used to run passenger-only ferries from Bremerton and Vashon, and those were canceled. And so there was a lifetime of experience, or at least generational experience, with passenger-only ferries. So that gave Kitsap County a little bit of a historical recollection that's fresher than other places. When we got the authority that we're not using, I guess, but in 2015, that was a hard-fought passenger-only ferry battle that in the end, they let Kitsap Transit win, because 10 years earlier, the state had canceled the passenger-only ferries. And so we could kind of play the victim a little bit of, well, you guys canceled our service, let us take it back. I mean, I feel like that was like set our people free kind of a thing, like let us solve our
It was part
problem.
of the narrative, yeah, back then. And, there was a particular Senate Transportation Chair from Island County at the time who was largely responsible for, pushing in that direction to get rid of the POF fleet from the state side. And, as probably the most impacted community, there was a nexus and a narrative that was very easy to maintain on behalf of Kitsap Transit. And that authority was given to us specifically and limited to us specifically for a reason at the time.
So this antagonism it's not about today, it's not, centered on house violence. It's a
No.
cultural thing. And the other thing that's the other thing that's a little bit different is the Senate Transportation Committee always been bipartisan. It's always been, if not an actual co-chair, it's always been treated that way, at least for 30 years, bipartisan. And the House doesn't run that way. So the dynamics are really different when you get to the Senate with the House.
It is, yeah.
I wonder, what is the next step though? Are you working with Rep. Nance?
I've had a lot of conversations with Rep. Nance, Senator Leas, and others over the final week or two of session as to where we go on this. And, if you are a process nerd, you will see how this played out, which is the House refused to concur in the Senate amendments, sent it back to the Senate. Senator Hansen, on behalf of his seatmate, sponsored a resolution or a motion asking the Senate to recede from their amendments. That resolution failed on the floor of the Senate, and a subsequent resolution to insist on the Senate's position was passed, and the bill was sent back to the House in the form that Rep. Nance was not supportive of. And so it was a take it or leave it, and they left it in the final 2 hours of session on Thursday. And so I believe there needs to be some discussions between the sponsor and some of the Senate folks as to what would or would not be acceptable in this area.
Madam Chair.
Like, I think that what really came out at the end was how we could be harmed by this if it goes awry. And so I think we really need Dylan in the middle of this, making sure we don't get
No,
hurt.
trust me, we were.
Exactly.
Building some
So,
bridges for us.
Madam Chair, I'm only sensitive to the time. We've got
Yes, thank
15
you.
minutes left, and we've got some other things so thank you, Dylan. I
You bet.
appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is in reference, and hopefully this won't take a long time, but we do have a representative on the PSRC Transportation Policy Board. Currently, Mayor Putanzu has been holding that seat, and Councilmember Mockler has been the alternative for that position. And it's that time of year where we need to revisit that, and not necessarily needed to change it, but just give the board an opportunity if they have any thoughts of transitioning. So
It would be problematic if I wasn't reappointed, and it's not that we couldn't solve that with the other city's seat, but I'm currently the vice chair of transportation policy, and we likely lose that vice chair position. So I think it's important that we stay the course, at least as long as I'm in leadership there at PSRC. So I'm happy to do it, if you wish me to continue to serve in that capacity.
Councilmember Mockler.
Thank you. Being Mayor Potenza's alternate is a sinecure. This guy never misses a meeting.
That's a good word.
So
Rarely.
I am happy to continue doing nothing as his alternate, or if by some magic chance I should, have an opportunity, I'd be very happy to attend in your stead, Mayor Potenza.
Well, thank you both for agreeing to continue your service. Is this something that we need to vote on, or do we just need a
if you
nod?
don't want to change it, we'll just
Everyone,
communicate
good?
that to
All right.
RCC. So
we'll continue onward. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
thank you for your leadership.
Since so that opportunity presents itself next month because I have a speaking engagement at the Chamber of Commerce. It's probably the first meeting I miss in 2 years. So if you wouldn't mind attending, that way I don't have to follow up with you. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes. You waited until we voted her back in.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Final discussion item, safe parking.
Yes, this is in reference to the issue of safe parking. This was brought before the board a while back. We've been continuing to work on that issue. Not a lot has changed in regards to getting the necessary permissions. If it's an FTA funded parking lot, we got to get their approval. If it's a state, we have to get their states. And of course, if it's a co-op, then we need to get whoever owns the lot, mostly churches, to get their permission on it. I did have a meeting last week with a captain from the Bremerton Police Department and a company that has gotten quite involved in administering, if you will, to whatever level of this safe parking. The way it was described to me is that the easiest way for me to understand it is there's different layers of homelessness. And at the lowest level, this is what we envision with homelessness, which is either drug addiction or mental illness issues. And then as you work your way, if you will, the level that we're talking about in a lot of cases, at least this particular company, is more of the working homeless, where folks who are trying to get back into the system, but for one reason or another, they're without a place to live, and they're living in their automobiles, but still trying to work every day at a job, whatever that may be, and things of that nature. There's a tremendous amount of stuff that would have to be done. This company certainly, if hired, would take on that responsibility of screening, for lack of a better term, even policing. You can set standards at parking lots to where, in that extreme case, they have to be out of the lot by 8 o'clock in the morning. Then they can come back and park there, say at whatever, 9 o'clock at night. One of the things that I learned in that discussion is that, as we can all imagine, this is not a single jurisdiction's problem. I met with the folks from the city of Bremerton because they're the ones that approached us, and the captain in the Bremerton Police Department is involved in it. But really, this is, I will say, for our particular case, it's a county-wide issue. it's more of a statewide issue that needs to be addressed more on a higher level than just trying to deal with one city. And I actually, in talking with the folks, think we should be bringing this forward, the problem, not a solution, but the problem to KRCC, which is more of all of us in a coordinated effort, because this firm that I talked with, I have no idea what they would charge to administer something like that, but to have the same rules that apply to all of the different jurisdictions, I think would be extremely beneficial. So although we're continuing to look at what we could do in our parking ride lots, I really think personally that this needs to be elevated to all the jurisdictions and look at any parking lot that is available and what those various conditions would be. This company that I spoke with is at no cost to us, providing me with a list of what are the issues that should be addressed or how they address it with the homeless population to qualify for being able to take advantage of, this safe parking situation. So I wanted to at least bring that back as kind of an update to the board, that we haven't ignored this issue. We're continuing to work on it, but this is a little bit different angle to it than what we're looking at to get permission at our particular lots, which I will say is going to be challenging. I don't want to sugarcoat it by any means. So anyway, I wanted to bring that back.
Great, thank you. I know that is something that we are going to discuss already at KRCC Executive Committee is new topics. So the homeless topic has been one that's been raised before. So we'll add that to the conversation.
Great, thank you. And I have a list of things.
Excuse me, Councilmember Mochler.
Thank you. I'll be brief. At my last town hall, one of the people who presented at my request was from Safe Park down in Pierce County, where they've been working with the faith-based community to provide parking for what they call the working poor. They're doing background checks, they're screening, they've worked out insurance, and in, I think, 3 years, they've had two times where they've had to call the police on any of their sites. So I will be happy to give you that information in case the KRCC would like to talk to Paula Anderson.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, let's move on. I'm seeing the time. Sorry, I'm not doing a good job managing it today.
I'm going to talk fast on. I've got a list of things that I wanted to at least bring to the board's attention. The first one, I just wanted to, we are planning for a board retreat in July, and some of the issues that we've identified that need to be discussed so that we can stay on task. From previous meetings, you've talked about revisiting the mission and vision statement for the transit, talk about goal setting and the process that we have for establishing goals. Also, we're looking at some strategic planning efforts. Service and service expansion is an issue. The capital match funds and things of that nature needs to be discussed at greater length. And then, the issue, I just want to reaffirm the issue of using grant funding for service expansions or service related tasks. A good example is we've got grant funding that pays for the additional sailings on our Bremerton Seattle ferry route, that now that grant's going away and we're going to be forced to cut service back. So historically, we have not used grant funding for service. We've used it for capital, and I just want to revisit that. So those are the topics. If there is anything else that you think we should be including in this discussion, please let us know so we can get it onto the agenda. Another issue that I wanted to bring is that I think it was last month, you gave us permission to acquire some all-wheel drive vans for our van pool program. The number of vehicles that was in that resolution was based on the assumption that we were going to pay sales tax for these vehicles. We have since learned that since they're rideshare vehicles, They're exempt from sales tax, which would provide us some additional funding to buy one or two more vans
Wow.
than what we initiated. So I wanted to bring that forward because the resolution did have a specific number, but it had a dollar amount attached to it. We can buy a couple extra vans and stay within the budgeted amount of the 360. The resolution that you approved was 321,000. So I just want to make sure that you're okay. We can go ahead and order a couple extra vans. Another issue that's come up recently is we currently have 1.5, if you will, safety and security positions within the agency. If you remember back to when you approved the budget, it included the position descriptions or the org chart. We have got an opportunity now. We had a safety position that was split half-time between the Marine operation and the bus operation. You approved expanding the Marine side to a full-time, which we took the individual that was being split, put that person in full-time for the Marines. We're recruiting for the half-time. We're having one heck of a time in recruiting. We've got two very strong candidates, but they're interested in full-time only. We've looked at the possibility of advancing from a half-time to a full-time. We can cover the additional wages for that position. It's only wages. They already get the benefits in that half-time status. We can go ahead and advance it to a full-time position and fill that, cover that additional cost through the end of the year. But next year, we'll be budgeting for that full-time if the board is okay. Normally, the board okays the org chart. So if you're comfortable with it, I will bring back to probably the next meeting a resolution that would support advancing that from a half-time to a full-time position. But I'd like to be able to recruit and fill that position right now as a full-time, and we'll put the caveat to the candidates that it's subject to your approval at a follow-up meeting. So if the board's okay with that direction, then okay, thank you. The other issue that I wanted to, we talked about the demonstration project with OC. We have an attorney, and I mentioned this briefly at the last board meeting. We have an attorney that was that approached us on some IRS tax credits for our electric buses. We were working with the assumption that we were only able to get the credit on the local match portion. And he has suggested that, no, we can ask for the credit for the entire cost of the vehicle. This attorney is willing to go forward and do all of the legwork on a contingency basis. He would only get paid if it was successful to recover the credit. It's around 800,000 total that we could get back. And his commission of 15% is roughly 132,000 out of that 800. So it's more of, we're not going to have to pay anything unless he's successful. And if he is successful, then we would go forward with that. So if the board is okay with that, we'd like to go ahead and enter into the arrangement. We've been working with Dave Weibel to make sure that we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. So it's the capacity to be able to track through the IRS process. Okay, I've got 1 minute left.
Quick question. What do you do with that credit? Is it actual money or is it like toll credit?
No, it's actual funds. It's dollars that we'll get. No, that's not enough.
We can buy a steering wheel.
Yeah, but it'll certainly go towards, whatever that it could be used for operational expenses too. Fuel.
Yeah.
Thank you. The last couple things I wanted to mention, one was a quick question. Our federal lobbyist, Jen, mentioned that she's sending us a weekly report on what's going on in DC. It covers way more than just transportation related. We've sent a copy of that out to the board here recently. And my question is, do you want to see those reports? We could send them out to you on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, whatever you would like.
I don't want you to create work, but if you're getting it, there's no harm in forwarding it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it would be. We just forward it out to the board. So, okay, we'll go ahead and send that out. The last thing is, I just wanted to bring to your attention a comment that we received from the Port Orchard community page. And I don't know if you all saw that, but if you would indulge me to read this, it's fairly short. And this is a good example of how your staff is dealing with today's world. It says, I am writing to express my sincere gratitude for the incredible support and protection I received from your staff today during a very distressing incident. While at the Port Orchard Ferry Dock, I was repeatedly harassed and followed by an individual. I want to specifically commend the following people for their immediate intervention and care. Justin, bus driver, for stepping in when I called for help and instructed the individual to move away. Joe, security officer in Port Orchard, for confronting the individual and, with the captain's permission, riding the ferry with me to ensure I arrived safely. The security team in Bremerton for meeting the ferry and escorting me safely to my bus. My friend, ferry worker, for providing emotional support and comfort while I was having a panic attack during the crossing. I've never experienced being followed before, and the quick action of your team made me feel safe during a terrifying situation. Please ensure that these individuals are recognized for the professionalism and kindness. Thank you again for looking out for your passengers. Shauna Brinkley. So anyway, I just wanted to share that, and we are certainly making sure that the staff that were involved were recognized and thanked. So, and that's it. I'm 2 minutes late. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm 2 minutes late. All right. So, was there any public comment?
No.
Received any? Don't hear. This is when you have somebody that wants to like talk for 30 minutes. All right. So, on to the good of the order. All right. Well, happy St. Patrick's Day. We adjourn and we're only 2 minutes over. Thank you. We made it.
Thank you.